or not?
Yes, 1 minute.
And can we spotlight Mary, please, while she's speaking? Thank you.
There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mary. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Hello, everybody, and welcome to you all for attending the Cerebral Palsy APPG today. And it's lovely to see you. And just before we start, can I ask people to tweet during the meeting and to use the Twitter handle hashtag APPG ONCP. That'd be great. Thank you. So yes, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and sharing this meeting today with such an amazing panel that we have. And I know we're all looking forward to this such a diverse evidence session that we've got before us. But first of all, I'd like to bring your attention to the report that the APPG launched on World Cerebral Palsy Day. And I'd like to thank all of those who submitted evidence, and many of them I know are joining us virtually today. The report, titled Growing Up, the Transition from Childhood to Adulthood, makes 10 recommendations to the government. And according to our research, the effectiveness of the existing legal framework and its execution in meeting the demands of young adults with CP is the single largest element in the difficulties faced when these young people enter adulthood. And the research cautions that councils and the providers of assistance frequently don't conform to the current special educational needs and disabilities law. And there appears to be very little accountability. Now, I'm aware that the report has been extensively read in Parliament and will continue to be there as a source of evidence for policymakers and academics in the future. But this evidence session is the first of a two-part series looking at the important idea of social participation for the cerebral palsy community and families. So this week, we're focusing on the experience of 0 to 11-year-olds. And then we'll meet again on the 15th of November to discuss the next steps from the age of 11 to adulthood. And the work of our APPG focuses on examining the impact of cerebral palsy as a lifelong condition. And it's hard to think of a more crucial phase than the formative years between childhood and adulthood. In any life, these are the years that have some of the most profound impacts on our direction in life. And for those living with cerebral palsy, this period is fraught with uncertainty around the availability of support, and this can have an impact. This can have an impact on those accessing social participation. So I'm delighted to welcome fellow parliamentarians who are joining us in the room and online. And joining our panel today, we have Professor Dido Green, who has more than 25 years of clinical and research experience as an occupational therapist, specialising in juvenile neurodisability at Guy's and St Thomas Hospitals in London. And she obtained a Master of Science in Clinical Neuroscience from the University of Surrey, a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Leeds, and a postdoctoral training in Translational Medicine from King's College London. We have Elektra, who rocketed to popularity on the third series of BBC's RuPaul's Drag Race UK. And now, after being raised by disabled parents, she's coming out to raise awareness about cerebral palsy. And finally, we have Ellie Simpson, who started the non-profit CP Teens UK in 2013 to serve young people in the United Kingdom who are affected by cerebral palsy or a related condition. And having started the organisation out of her own home, she saw its growth continue even while she attended classes at Sheffield Hallam University in England. And the organisation grew to include CP Tweens for kids aged 9 to 13 and CP Tinies for kids aged 3 to 8. And Ellie is also a world record-breaking Team GB para-athlete, specialising in the 100 and 200 metre frame running events. So welcome to you all. That's just a fantastic panel. But I'd now like to ask Ellie to address the APPG with her views on today's important topic. So over to you, Ellie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Ellie, and I've just been introduced, but I'll introduce myself again. I'm the founder of CCT, and I'm also a trained running athlete in Great Britain. And so, growing up, I had a fantastic social experience in my early years, but this was down to my family, who didn't want to limit me and wanted to fully integrate me. If it had been left to the so-called professionals, I wouldn't have had the chance to speak on this with other able-bodied children. Professionals wanted to teach me sign language from the moment it became apparent that I had speech and articulation difficulties. My mum wasn't against this, but neither did she want to give up on me talking even before I even had a chance. Also, professionals believe that a specialist setting was the only possible place for me. My parents have seen how being around other able-bodied toddlers like my cousins has brought me on, and they decided off the back of this to put me in a mainstream preschool 3 days a week and a special educational needs preschool 2 days a week. I did eventually start to speak, and over time the words turned into sentences. Even at the age of 3, I showed frustration at being lumped together with other children with a vast range of disabilities. From my frustration, as well as it being clear that my intellect wasn't affected by my disability, against that, my parents decided to send me to mainstream school. At mainstream school, in the early years, I flourished, and everyone wanted to be my friend because I was unique and different. And at that age, children don't really care. They have no preconceived ideas or prejudice. I feel that if my parents hadn't been so open-minded, I wouldn't have had the chance to go to mainstream school. I wouldn't have had the chance to speak or socialise with other children. I know a lot of young children with cerebral palsy are denied social opportunities as people and professionals can be quick to make assumptions and labels. It was around the age of 10 or 11 things became more difficult socially. Children became less tolerant as they got older, and this often peaked in the teenage years. I was also becoming more aware of my disability, including my challenges of verbally communicating with able-bodied peers due to their lack of patience. not only this, I stopped getting invited to parties and stuff outside of school. My mum made a massive effort to have people round at our house, but there was no getting away from the fact that my able-bodied peers were becoming more independent in the way that I couldn't, which greatly impacted on my social interaction. At age 11, there was a major transition to secondary school. I continued on to mainstream secondary school as this was the right environment for me. But in my opinion, there needs to be a much better support process around this age, not just academically, but socially. Everything was geared around my educational support and the logistics of moving around a big school. For example, who would do videos what chair would be located in which classroom, etc., etc. There was nothing in place to support my social interaction. When my parents first brought it up with my primary school at around the age of 10, that I was being left out, there was mum almost to say, well, doesn't really matter, it's, you know, not that important. There was no support, there was no plan, and this resulted in me becoming very socially isolated. So at age 11, personally, I believe it's a make or break age, but an overwhelming number of parents who contact CPT UK when their child is around 10 or 11 years old, it's to be a really common age to start struggling with social interaction. Children become less tolerant and inclusive, and combined with this, children with cerebral palsy become more aware of their disability, and these two factors together can massively impact on social interaction. There is no support included in the major life transition from primary school to secondary school. But how can we ensure that children with cerebral palsy in transitional stage, and how can we ensure it's ongoing? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that everybody can see the
Thank
PowerPoint?
you, Ellie. That was
No.
I can.
Yep.
I can.
Okay, that's great. Now we'll continue then.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Ellie. I think you made some really important points there. Obviously, you were very lucky in the junior school that you went to, and the parents and the friends that you made. But I think you make a very important point about the social interaction side of things being missed in favour of the school opting to maybe focus more on the physical and logistical side of things. So that was a really, really important point that you made, that's what policymakers and schools need to think about more. So thanks so much for that, Ellie. I now want to welcome Elektra. I can't see who's in the room actually. Has Elektra is she there? Yes. Yeah, I want to
Elektra has arrived.
It has arrived, right? Okay. Sorry. I couldn't see who was in the room. Didn't know if she'd managed to get in yet, Annette. So welcome, Elektra, or Julian, whichever you prefer. Well, Julian, Elektra, straight over to you.
Hello, can you all see me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to put my laptop. Sorry, one moment. I just need to Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? You all good? Yeah. So my name is Julian Riley. I'm also known as. I'm also known as my stage name Elektra. For anyone who is unaware, I'm a drag queen off the telly. My pronouns are he, they out of drag and she, they in drag. Let me start by saying thank you so much for having me here today. It means so much to me and my family. And I hope that my story will somewhat help both you and the families with my story. So I'm here to share my experience growing up with my amazing, loving parents who happen to have cerebral palsy. My amazing mum was born in 1950, and she's my best friend, she's my rock, and she's my inspiration. And she's also known by my fans as Mama Friends, which is great because everyone seems to love my mum. It's really good. Sadly, when she was born, the doctor told my grandparents that she's better off, and I'll quote those, lock her up and throw away the key. Well, of course, they were wrong about that. 7 years later, my lovely father was born, and my father was diagnosed when he was 2. The doctors described him as, I quote, backwards, which is of course derogatory and very offensive. Sorry, I just scroll. It's very offensive. They later said he won't do anything with his life due to his condition. Well, once again, they were wrong. Sadly, due to their disability, a lot of people struggle to understand my parents due to their speech. I'll never forget going to the bank when I was growing up as a child. The person behind the till would speak to me directly, even though I was 6. They would never talk to my parents. They talk over my parents to me and say like things about mortgages or financial things that a 6-year-old child does not understand. People would also stare at my parents. Even in 2022, people still do that to this day. I believe this comes down to one thing, and that's education. In this day and age, my parents' reality are being spoken down to due to their physical disability. I would have hoped we moved on from that, but there is a lot more work to be done. Through that, we are heading in the right direction. People with cerebral palsy must never feel disregarded, and we cannot leave people behind like this. So where do we go from here? I recently had a call with my parents and a gentleman called Richard, who I met through a charity called Scope, who helped my family a lot. The charity Scope, I don't know if you're aware, is a charity for disability, for people who are disabled, and they've helped my family a lot from when I was growing up. I asked them if there's anything they'd like me to bring forward to you guys today, and they said if they want to talk about neurophysiotherapy. Getting an appointment for neurophysiotherapy is incredibly difficult due to budget cuts. People with cerebral palsy are not receiving the help that they need and deserve. At this time, an adult with cerebral palsy can only get a 6-week block of neurophysiotherapy. This is not enough, but there are urgent requirements for people's quality of life, mental health, and they are worth fighting for. Cerebral palsy does not stop at the age of 18. It goes all the way through your life, from day 1 till the end. So I think this is why we do need support for people like that, for people with cerebral palsy. Also, transportation can be difficult. My mother is a wheelchair user, and getting her from A to B isn't the easiest of things, especially in London with the Underground. I wanted to see Buckingham Palace once. I had to get off like a mile away because the lifts weren't working, and to get someone up an escalator in a wheelchair is not ideal and it's not safe, and I do not recommend doing that. In summary, it all comes down to 3 things: education, access, and respect. It's not much to ask, but it can make a big difference. This is just the tip of the iceberg of things that can change, and I would be very happy to come back and speak to you in future to discuss this further. I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here today. Honestly, it means a lot to me and my family, and I'm sure it means a lot to everyone who's watching here today. P.S. This is a little side note. My mother and I will be presenting an award together for the Scope Awards this month. My mum will be on stage with me presenting the award. So to those doctors who said that she won't be anything in life, watch this space because my mum is skyrocketing. So thank you so much for having me here today. Honestly, it does mean the world that I've been able to talk to you guys. I've never thought I'd ever be able to come to Parliament and other houses of Parliament or anything to do with Parliament. And here I am talking to my parents. And to those doctors who disagreed with them and said there won't be anything, they created me. Thank you so much. Any questions? Feel free to ask. I will hopefully answer. Is that the now?
That's later.
Oh, sorry. Ask me later. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that, Julian. Tremendous. You finished that off with exactly the right sentiment. Look what your parents produced. And I'm sure all of us will want to tune in to what you get in your award with your mum there. That'll be super duper, and congratulations on that. That was excellent. And I mean, I think what stuck out for me there was the fact that we all know it, that, you know, the old adage where someone with a disability and people talk across them and say, you know, does he take sugar? But that takes biscuit that they talk to a 6-year-old about mortgages and what have you, instead of looking at your parents. Absolutely shocking. And you're right, it's about education and respect. So thank you for that, and I'm sure there'll be some questions coming up in the chat after we've listened to the next speaker. So our final speaker is Professor Dido Green, and I'll just hand straight over to you, Professor.
Hi, I'm so, like Elektra, just so pleased to be here today and be invited to share something that is so close to me, such a passion of mine in not just fixing some impairments as a therapist, my background being as an occupational therapist, but actually looking at the skills, the strengths, and how we use them in daily life. So I wanted to share with you some of our thoughts regarding from the academic side and also the clinical side of what we think participation is, or how we feel about it, and where do we see it, and how does it happen. We can certainly see that we know when it's not happening. Environmentally, we can see the barriers. I think that's where Ellie was saying that there tends to be a focus of something that we think we can do something about, maybe getting access to a lift when you can't use the stairs. But actually, participation is more than that. And it's not just about attending, but being involved. And being involved is how you engage, how you feel about that, enjoyment, but also the intensity of the experience for you. So participation is being there, attending, but being involved while being there. And as a professional group, we're now moved from the more classical medical paradigm of impairments lead to activity impairments and restrictions and disability, but seeing that the skills in the family participation constructs, we see that the skills of the individual, the personal activity capacity, are only one of those pictures, along with preferences, and preferences are from experiences, and also your sense of competence, because we all want to do things that we feel we can achieve in, and these interact dynamically with the context of the activity and the environment. But what we've been traditionally focusing on in the disability world from an academic and clinical perspective is what we can do recently to change the environment. But we've been focusing on the physical environment rather than the attitudinal environment. And I think both our speakers before me have captured that it's a dynamic space, not something you just measure at one point in time, but there's a constant interaction between that. And communication is vital in that respect. So Ellie mentioned this, she didn't feel we were listening. Back in 2010, I decided to run some summer camps involving children. And when they had the trust, at lunchtime, listening to the conversation with each other, we had comments like, from this 11-year-old, games at school, they always choose that. It's game time after run. And didn't other side always floats because they know they're going to win. That doesn't make you feel good inside, does it? A 7-year-old, I'm always on stage giving out certificates as a token disabled child. Now I will be on stage because of my own skills. These kids, we train them to do magic skills and put them on, they went on stage performing magic in their own right. And this same 7-year-old commented about his new friend with his mother and about new friends, because he's older and he's okay. So he was a 16-year-old boy in the same camp as a 7-year-old, which I hadn't thought that age group would work, but this boy was so thrilled to think that he can grow up and he'll be okay. And here's another one that just broke my heart. They won't sit next to me at school if they don't want to catch my disease. So children have a lot of insight to the social challenges. So I shifted my work entirely from focusing on what children can't do and trying to fix the reach or the grasp or the ability to dress, but focusing on what those skills really need. And I wanted to share with you some interesting work we started just before the pandemic and lockdowns, and a collaboration between the Cerebral Palsy Centre in Wales and Brunel University and the University in Sweden and Fight the Stroke in Italy. And we had children aged from 3 to 10 years of age participating in different summer camps, 2-week summer camps. And we decided to use the child and adolescent scale of participation, which has 4 dimensions of how you are engaged in your family life as per you would be expected for a peer without a disability, school life, community life, and general, daily activities. And it includes the social context of it. And what I was pleased to see, and there's a scale here in graphs, and academics always like to use graphs and numbers, don't we? But we have this y-axis there is rather stretched, so it exacerbates the difference. But we have a trend going in the right direction that after the camp, children were participating more, doing more things and enjoying more things with their peers as would be appropriate for their ages. But the saddest thing that I found was that even at the ages of 3 and 4, the most predominant impact of having cerebral palsy as a child was the impact of friendships and family life at that very young age. So what do we need to do, and what does the research tell us? Well, friends and social and physical activity participation are important to children with cerebral palsy and families. Our speakers before me have articulated that much better than I could ever do. There's a complex and dynamic relationship between the capacity and perceived competence and the number and diversity. This great, it's not just doing one activity more and more, it's the diverse wealth of experience you get from doing more diverse things with friends that contributes to the quality of that. And there's some numbers in there just to show that these are significant differences between the capacity and the skills and perceived competence. So the belief in that, and if we as professionals are keep saying, oh, this child can't do this, that, and the other, that's hardly going to build sense of competence. The personal factors then associated with cerebral palsy impacted most on friendships and family life, and even as young as 3-year-olds. So interventions to enhance physical activity, which have been growing across childhood for many different populations. However, these do not necessarily enhance attendance because participation and the desire to do that is more than just being put in a room or put onto the playing field. It's how you feel included and involved. And research tends to consider the impact of interventions, or we need to consider that from a broader perspective, not just have we got increased hand function, longer gait stride, but we need to include all the efforts that have been proposed by Peter Rosenberg and Jan Willem Gorter, which include fun, friendships, family, and future, not just fitness and function, to support social participation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Thank you very much for that, Dido. Very important and interesting research there. We're now coming over to some questions. So Hello, folks. I guess I've just been talking there without anybody because I was on mute. I was just saying thank you to Dido for that very important research there. And thank you to all the speakers. We now are coming to some question and answers and discussion, I guess. So because I'm not in the room, I cannot see if anyone has the hand up. But Paul, I believe Paul Maynard's in the room.
Yeah, I'm right at the back.
Could you have a look at to see? Could you do this bit, Paul, for the real life people, and I can have a look in the chat box for the attendees online.
Does anyone physically in the room have a question? Because I think Mary can probably see what's online. Yes, go on.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Ben Sutcliffe from Cornwall Children. Just to say that thank you to all three speakers. I think you all raised really important points. My question is related to some of Ellie's comments, but for you, Professor Green, whether you found anything around that that change from early years to the 10 to 11. I think that's really poignant that everybody embraced Ellie's uniqueness in those early years, and then that changed at that transition period to 10 to 11. And then just on the other point, I think your final point about what your parents did in creating you also brings us on to a very important area about aspiration. And at Cornwall Children, we're really focused on making sure that the children with disabilities have the right aspiration. Having a family and having children is definitely part of that future aspiration. So you're a shining example of what children should aspire to. So back to that initial question.
No, very good points, and I think Ellie highlighted that transition to the teenage years, the problems in communication and the need for extra time, and also help with the peers to help them feel more comfortable. So education is vital for that, but also helping peers feel comfortable about how to play, how to engage. And I think what I've learned is that we need to stop providing interventions in isolated environments, but deliver them in meaningful, natural context with peers. So I would expect, the buddy system that Noah Shields has been developed with their fit skills, where there's an able peer budding with a child with cerebral palsy and they go to the gym together, is showing some nice continuation, but the friendships don't develop so much there. There's a dependency that's not establishing. Friendships build on their strengths. So we're getting something, we haven't got that magic that right yet. But definitely there's a transition between that move to secondary school that's critical. And friends aren't made in the classroom. Friends aren't made in structured settings. They're made those 5 minutes when you're waiting for a lift. How can you make a friend if you've got an adult minder there pushing a wheelchair? And who's going to tell an intimate secret when there's an adult there? I don't want to recommend smoking, but you want to have the opportunity. And my dad is a lung physician, so I definitely don't want to recommend smoking. But you want to have the option to sneak around behind the building and do something, push the edge of an envelope a little bit, and do some mischief.
Anyone else will ask my own question? Did you see any difference between settings where every child had cerebral palsy versus settings that were mixed? I ask that because I did 15 years of riding for the disabled, surrounded by equally disabled children. As long as I got on a sports pitch at school, I was practically the last one to be picked, and I was getting, a special badge for, lasting an hour, others got badges for achievements. I got a badge for this existing, which really empowered very much. Which do you think is a very better path to go down in that regard?
Well, what I did see when we set up the camps for children with hemiplegia, these children are generally the only one in their school. And so one of the children in the interviews we did, and the paper that we do need to try and get published again, was saying that he hadn't realized there were other kids like him. So there was an importance of having that safe space. And but the transition, I think we're not getting the development of that participation and social participation if we keep them separate. So I think there's a role for building the skills, building on the strength, building on the debating skills, the strength-based assessments rather than, oh, what the impairment might be, what surgery we can do, you know. But getting the timing right, and yeah, in the education, I think supporting teachers, I think, in how do you engage a child in a wheelchair in the playground? Wheelchair basket, put them all in a wheelchair, and the typical peers will be in panic mode. It's terrifying, wheelchair basket. So, you know, there are lots of different things we can do, but teachers need to be supported on what we can do at a mixed level, that there's no disability in it. I think, Jim, we were talking before about the role of art. There's no able and disabled. You are creative, and the world of arts can have perhaps a better role in some of the social activities.
Well, we have a question from Baroness Stephanie Fraser online, which I'm really asked to all speakers to answer. So it says, what formal measures do the speaker think need to be put in place to make the most positive difference? Julie, would you like to start?
Education. I think people need to be educated on how to treat people and not just like disregard people. Like going back to what you said, like at school, for a person who had parents who have cerebral palsy, I was picked on. My parents were called so many names under the sun, and then I was left out because people thought that I couldn't do sports or I couldn't do things like that. And then it's also like, obviously there were people in my class who were also like in wheelchairs and things, and then I saw them getting left out. So I just think like even the teachers need to be educated as well on how to like speak to someone, not like going back to the thing about the bank. When people talk to my mum, they talk to her like she's a child, like this, and it's quite patronising. Adults shouldn't do that. Adults should know better, and shouldn't speak to children like that, or people who are disabled, or anyone like that. So I think it all stems from like education as a whole, really. And yeah.
Great. Is Ellie online still? I'd like to answer the question, what, here we go, Ellie Simpson, proper support at key ages and transitions, as Ellie's answer. And Professor Green.
I think building on the education, but also the opportunities to put that education into practice. So setting up, I put one of our intervention tools on stage and invited the kids with disability and without disability all on stage together to work together on something new and building something together. And that gave the children without, well, so-called disabilities, I thought we all have disabilities in some respects, are ignorant, but doing something together that was productive, providing those opportunities in real environments, so setting up the venues and providing funding to support these creative activities at those important years in particular. So they're moving into secondary school where kids are off on their own. They know how to meet with others in the playground or after school. One of the things I was always struck with is the transport to schools. A lot of these children have special transport, so they never get to loiter because the drivers have to get on and get away. So they're shunted, they arrive, they go straight into the classrooms, and they don't make their friends after school, which is, they don't get to go to the sweet shop or, that's an opportunity to be missed, but that's where you make your friends. Discussing how much you dislike your teachers, or how are you going to do that when you have teachers with power chaperoning you?
Good answers. We have Rebecca's iPad, which you might ask a question. Rebecca, would you like to ask the question vocally, or I can read your comment that you've written? I'll read it.
Sorry, I'm just muting.
Okay.
The reason I put that is because I find that I went round, I competed for Britain, and I went round with my medals and went round primary schools and got them to ask me any question that they wanted about cerebral palsy. And I found it to be a really positive experience, because how can children learn about cerebral palsy and that we are human beings, etc., and that we've got feelings if we don't educate them? So I did get some quite abstract questions, but I did also get some really questions that I would never have dreamt of, but they obviously thought long and hard about it. So I did, like, for instance, I did a 10-minute thing in the assembly, and then I went round each of the classrooms and let them try on all my uniforms, just look at my medals, ask me any questions whatsoever. And the very first question I got asked by a 5-year-old was, where did I sleep? I'm not sure whether it was a totally random question or whether it was because he was thinking, well, how does she get upstairs? And the teacher were very embarrassed by the question, but, you know, it's something that he was asking for whatever reason. And I think it's important that we answer children as honestly as we possibly can. And I think that way, hopefully, we can show people that we are decent and we have got feelings and we can live our lives fully and enjoy our lives.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. Would any of the speakers like to respond with comments?
Sorry, I was just about to what happened at the end there. Yeah, I think it's going back to what I said, like, about the teachers and things, like, not knowing the answers. Like with the, well, where do you, was the question, where do you sleep?
Yes.
Yeah, like, a teacher should be able to answer that, I think. Obviously it stems from the education again. I think all three of us have said the word education, I think. So, yeah.
Great.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, of course.
MPs are always allowed to interrupt MPs. There's a really interesting issue here, which is a difficult one. It's really great to have role models of people with CP who are achieving. And very often that is in the form of sporting achievement. You see the Paralympics, it's fantastic. People have trained really hard, made the most of all their talents, and rightly deserve all the praise they get. Equally, I promise once to get a narrative given to me, well, you know, if you're not a Paralympian, you're not a very good, you know, disabled person, are you? Because you're not trying hard enough. Why are you not achieving like they are? Even though our skill sets may be different. And that, I'm thinking that, if anything, increase as a narrative rather than decrease worryingly. And yet, in my own constituency in Blackpool, I have an organisation called Tramchan, the equivalent to Teaching Change you have in London, of inclusive theatre. When we were discussing earlier about inclusivity, to me, what I see on the stage at Tramchan is actually much more inspiring in terms of role models, or as inspiring, rather not to downplay the Paralympics, but it's achievement of a different sort, and we need to get society to look at our achievements, not just the sporting ones.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And having fun and having friends is an important achievement.
So to all Paralympians on the call. Yeah, I'm not dissing you.
Actually, I was going to touch on a similar point and ask Ellie where she felt that the Paralympic and the parasport movement was heading, because I think coming back to your point about getting all children to do wheelchair basketball would open their eyes a little bit. And now there is this huge separation between parasport and non-disabled sport, and we need to get closer to it just being sport. So I'm interested to know where Ellie thought that was heading and where it is at the moment. It's not taking away the fantastic growth in the sport, but now I think it's something we can do more with.
Yeah, and I think Ellie and you've touched on the education side, but what Rebecca just said, going into the schools and then going into the classrooms, but actually having our children try and use a communication device. Not disabling the communication device, because what happens when you go on a school trip, a child in a wheelchair has their communication device in their backpack. So they then can't do the sing-along and their voice isn't heard, because if you don't have a powerful enough voice, you can't shout above the rest of them. But since you want the mic on you want hanging from the chair and that your switch device is accessible and a loudspeaker so you can shout the loudest. So thinking of creative ways to engage and involve rather than just being in attendance because you're sat on that school bus.
We're going to the final 10 minutes, so I've got a comment and a couple of questions to ask the panel. So this is from Francesca Lewis Brown, who said, "My teachers didn't know how to help me. Even my friend's daughter's teachers do not know how to give them help, and their answer is just to give her a computer and not help her to learn to write. They also didn't want her to play in the playground as they didn't have the stuff to help her move," which is sure a common theme. Cerebral palsy. And then Amanda Richardson has asked, "I'm interested to know whether there has been any research on the experience of children with very complex, profound cerebral palsy on social participation." Professor Green, can answer this one?
Well, the research at this level is documenting that it's reduced for children with severe communication problems, manual ability problems, or gross motor limitations. What we have our classification scales, we like to put the higher numbers to the more impaired levels, but those at 4 and 5, which are the most severe levels, are more restricted, and those restrictions get more and more distinct the older you get. So by the time you're leaving school, you're fairly well isolated at that level. So we've documented it, but we haven't figured out a way to shift that.
Great. And Ruth Ann has asked, "How do we take in consideration those who use changing places toilets?" How do we take in consideration that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, you build more of them.
Build more of them. Is
The amount of venues I've been to with my mum in a wheelchair, like theatres, it's everywhere. It's so hard because sometimes it's not a stable toilet or it's not big enough. I've just literally been on tour this past 7 weeks, and I was put in a couple of rooms which were made for disabled people, and in those rooms, the things in the rooms were so not right. It was like hand dryer was so high, and the toilet was so low, and everything was just not. It didn't seem correct. Even the emergency strings were too high. Someone was on the floor. How are we going to get that? And I think going to just literally touch on that subject, we do need more, but the ones that we've got need seeing to as well.
And there's the toilet head. When you speak the toilet, I was need to be listed as invincible. I get the
shows
that far away.
I don't think it does matter.
I do that anyway, just go in the toilets and figure out how to use them. If you have one arm or you have poor posture, you definitely need a carrier in there, but that's not what you have to do it all for you. They can't actually do the toilet for you.
Yeah.
And we have one final question from Angus McIntyre, who said, "Is there any evidence of schools beginning to move in the right direction recently?" Any evidence of schools moving in the right direction? Any positive stories?
I think we have a good example in Nottingham, but I can't remember the name of the school, in which they have graduates in a special school who are our governors on the school board directing what's happening within the school. So that's a nice, aspect of getting that voice heard. It's what happens in and out of the classroom, the after school hours.
And I think it's mainstream schooling where the biggest gaps in understanding and education are. Specialist provision is not always perfect, and it's still a lot of way to go, but to create truly inclusive education has a long way to go in mainstream school.
A mainstream school, some teachers knowing how to help rather than merely trying to be well-meaning, actually finding they're making matters worse, not better. and the tyranny of low expectation, the presumption that you as an individual pupil can't do certain things rather than to protect you in some way, rather than challenge you and say, well, let's see, you know, how you go.
I thought Ellie's point was really poignant about it shifting to logistical support rather than social.
Yeah, so the attendance physically, but not the attitudinal involvement, and considering the perspective of the child, the preferences. I mean, everybody has to do some things we don't like doing in our daily life, but establishing need for that, but building on preferences and providing opportunities. After school clubs that are, you know, teaching people how to have, you know, someone's in a wheelchair, you can do lots of activities, tumbling, gymnastics using the wheelchair. As a vaulting course, I've seen that happen.
And it's not just the school, it's the youth groups, it's the scouts, it's the guides, it's the other. And I think the scouts I know have made great strides in trying to make what they do more inclusive. And almost, I think the schools could learn from the scouts, perhaps.
I just wanted to make a comment because my research is listening to the voice of adults with cerebral palsy. It's not focused on childhood experience, but what's really strongly coming through in all the research is that childhood experience is very present in adulthood and then really the future. The policy making need to consider the life cycle approach.
Great, so we're coming to the last 5 minutes. I know that we'll be kicked out of this room. We've got some more questions coming through, but I'm going to jot them all down and then get answers to everybody who's asked a question. Unfortunately, we don't have time today. We'll be tweeting about the event on our Twitter, and we'll be having the recording up online as YouTube as well. Apologies about some of the IT issues today. It's always the way with these sort of things, especially in the House of Commons of all places. But as I'm sure Paul and Mary know all about that. So yes, Mary, if you could close the meeting for us, please.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'm sure this conversation could have gone on much longer. So please, if you do have any other questions, then send them in to the Secretariat. And so thank you to Ellie and Julian and Dido for your input. That was super to hear. Really, really thanks for coming along and giving your time. And thanks for everybody else who's come along and attended today. And just before we go, can I ask you, if you haven't read the latest APPG report, then you can find it on the website and on our Twitter page by just Googling APPG on cerebral palsy, and the full documents there on the web. You can find out more information on any of that by contacting the Secretariat. So our next meeting will be on the 15th of November, and at that one we'll be looking at the experiences of children aged 11 to 18-year-olds with cerebral palsy. So it'll be lovely to see you at the next session. And thank you once again, everyone, for coming. And next time I see you, Julian, I want to have you in the whole kit, please, as Elektra. I'd love to bring you. I'd love to bring you through Parliament with your blue and yellow.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get the press there as well.
Okay, so thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.